QB3 is the same as everybody else's. Jaxson Dart, Ole Miss.
Same. Yeah, we're the same all the way through, maybe. QB3, Jaxson Dart. Now, here's what before you get into the Jaxson Dart thing, I would say I think Dart's a little closer to the next tier of quarterbacks myself. And when I ranked 3 through 8, I don't see massive differences. I think they're all developmental guys. I think they all have positives to work around and negatives as well. So I'm more of the Jaxson Dart's more of a day 2 and beyond type of player than he is a day 1. I know we've heard plenty of rumors about him going in round 1 here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And I think there's a bigger gap between Shedeur Sanders and Jaxson Dart than people seem to be making out there is now. I think there's I think Shedeur is closer to Cam Ward than he is Jaxson Dart, to be honest. And I actually think a lot of the
I want to say the similarities though between Dart and Sanders, I think there's a lot of similarities for me in how they play.
Yeah, but I actually think a lot of the a lot of the negatives that people are applying to Shedeur apply equally to Jaxson Dart, and I'm not hearing any of those at the moment, which is wild. Like everyone's focusing on the positive for Dart and the negative for Shedeur, and yet I think if anything, they're worse for Dart.
You and I, we unlocked that a little bit, I think, when we were talking to Renner, and that was a great discussion that we had with him last Thursday. If you haven't seen it yet, we were saying, and we're trying to change this, the way we talk about players is always relative to these expectations, right? Sanders is a perceived number 2 overall pick that people are trying to pick apart and say, well, he's not worth number 2 overall. Jaxson Dart is this former 3rd round prospect. It was a 3rd rounder 2 months ago that people are trying to talk back up into the 1st round. If they were coming from different places, the conversations would change. You would talk about, here's what Shedeur does well to deserve to go in the 1st round. Here's what Jaxson Dart doesn't do well to not deserve to go number 2 overall, when theoretically they might be a similar late 1st round type of prospect, honestly, when it's all said and done.
Well, so if I was putting, that's where I think, I mean, you and I obviously disagree. Just again, this is how this works this year. Everyone has the same order. The only disagreement is how close together they are. If you come from the starting point of Shedeur was either 1 or 2 overall and Jaxson Dart is a 3rd round player, I agree that they are closer than that and that the two should be seen as closer than that. But I also don't, I think it's moving too far to say that they're basically in the same place, right? Like to me, Shedeur is a guy that could and should go in the top 10, and Jaxson Dart is a guy that should be a fringe 1st, early 2nd round type of player. That's where they belong in actuality to me. So they're moving in the right directions in order to get closer together based off how they started. But I think that the conversation has gone too far. So Jaxson Dart, a lot of the same flaws, right? Number one, like you have to navigate the Ole Miss offense, which again is not, not a pro style type of offense. It has its own quirks and characteristics they have to deal with. He also has a lot of the same tendencies though, in terms of I don't think handle pressure particularly well. He's got very weak escapability and has a similar tendency to try and make it happen anyway. And I feel like he has an even worse ability to get away from it than Shedeur Sanders does. Don't love his scrambling instincts either at all. Like he gets caught a lot trying to make plays happen when things are breaking down. His touch on deep passes is hit or miss, like sometimes it's perfect, it's right in the bucket. Sometimes like, whoa, that's a rough pass given the one-on-one opportunity you had. The one thing I do like about him a lot is and then he doesn't have the traits that Cam Ward has. Again, falls into that kind of bucket of they're fine. They're not particularly noteworthy in either direction to me. The one thing he does have that I really like, though, is I have rarely seen a quarterback with the complete and total lack of processing time and thinking time that he has once he reads something, right? He's going through his read. And again, the offense, there's not that many, full field reads, sort of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 type of sequences. But when he gets the green light in his brain, right, when he looks up and he sees it and it's open, the ball is gone. Like it's instant. There's zero lag time. There's zero processing time. It's like a direct reflex connection between his brain and his arm that as soon as he gets the green light, the ball's gone. I love that.
I think a lot of that's that offense, though, too. Like they do a really good job of defining things. I mean, Lane Kiffin, remember when we were saying that the Tennessee offense a couple years ago for Hendon Hooker
Yeah.
is bad for NFL evaluations? That's a compliment to your college head coach, Tennessee fans. This is a compliment to Lane Kiffin. I mean, they do. We talk about switch releases being like, kryptonite to NFL defenses. They're doing creative stuff off of switch releases that are just opening things up left and right. So I think they do a good job of defining the reads for Dart.
Sure. But even within that, even with that context, like his lack of thinking time in those situations is, I think, noteworthy. I think it's remarkable. Like even other quarterbacks in these systems where the reads are simple and it's like a yes or no, you can still see the lag, right? It's like being on a bad internet connection. You can see the split second of like thinking about it, right? Yes, this is good. Okay, I can throw it now, and then the ball's gone. Dart, it's all one connection. It's like the second, like literally the millisecond that his brain processes this is good, the ball's in the air.
I didn't always see that from him. I thought there was some delay there, but I didn't think it was as clean as what you're saying.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button, and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about.
Just to clarify a couple things here. I don't think he's a great athlete, pocket athlete. And the pushback I've gotten on that is that, well, he had 500, 600 rushing yards or whatever it is. I think he's a fine runner. I think he's a very willing runner, right? Like Wake Forest, he drops his head and like runs through 3 tackles, a little bit of Sam Howell to him. Sam Howell straight up played like a fullback, though, that final year. So I think Dart's like a fine scrambler, as far as picking up yards. But the similarities that I agree with you to, say, Shedeur Sanders is the pocket athleticism. When he tries to break free from a rusher, when he tries to maneuver the pocket, I don't love it. I don't love it I don't love it at all, much like Shedeur. So I don't necessarily like his ability to break free from sacks, make special plays. Now, some of his best throws are the plays where he is a little bit on the move or getting hit. I think he makes huge throws getting hit. I think he's got great touch. The number of times that I wrote down touch for him versus other quarterbacks watching him, I think is astronomically in his favor. I thought the intermediate anticipation and feel was there. So when you said, hey, he sees it and gets, I liked his anticipation at the intermediate level. I thought he saw some stuff really well there. So touch throws, the 10 to 19 yard throws, I think he was really good. I'm with you on the deep ball, very inconsistent. I don't even know what his deep ball stats are. I imagine that they're very good, but deep ball stats, if you're just using stats, those are often scheme driven, wide receiver driven. He had Trey Harris. He had some speed out there. He had Lane Kiffin. The stats are probably fine, but his deep ball was all over the place. He was long with it. He was short with it, but he's also willing to give his guys opportunities to make plays. He'll just chuck it up and let them go get it. So that, to me, at the NFL level, that could become really volatile. If you have dudes who can go up and get it, you might have some good years throwing the ball down the field. That profile reminds me a little bit of the way I described Sam Darnold coming out of USC. I thought Darnold was fantastic, intermediate level, inconsistent deep ball. I mentioned Mac Jones as a comp before, just around that lens where I think Mac Jones, anticipation, intermediate level was good, deep ball, inconsistent. I think Jaxson Dart has elements of those guys to their game. It's never 100% when it comes to comparisons.
Yeah, it's not. But I do think like Shedeur and Dart profile quite similarly. Like they're reasonably similar players. The question is like the differences around the fringes and how it manifests and how it's being talked about. And then, like the chat is complaining about, oh, one of them is a product of their offense and the other one isn't. Like everyone is a product of their offense to some degree. The question is how much. Colorado's offensive line was extreme in terms of how bad it is. Ole Miss's was not, right? So that's relevant when we're trying to figure out how much of a flaw is on the quarterback versus the system, right? These are the things. So, like, I think these two guys have very similar strengths and weaknesses, but the question is trying to figure out how extreme A are they with those traits, and B are the other influencing factors in those traits. For Shedeur, the offensive line was extreme in terms of its influence in how he played and how many sacks he took and those negative plays. It wasn't for Jaxson Dart. So when you're comparing like the negative tendencies to run around at the back, get sacked, take bad plays under pressure, like that's a relevant factor in terms of which one, where's the slider, right? How much is on the QB? How much is on the offense?
The other thing I would say that's different between Dart and Shedeur too, I thought Dart struggled against good zone coverage when teams matched up against Ole Miss's route concepts. That's when I think he started to drop his eyes, and you see that's what you're going to see a lot at the NFL level, right? Zone principles that are zone match type of principles. When that stuff was taken away, I saw Jaxson Dart more out of his element when he's seeing man coverage and he could, chuck the one-on-one or whatever, or it was just schemed open. I thought he did a nice job of finding that. Whereas Shedeur was the opposite, right? When he had zone, bing, bang, boom, he's finding his guys. Once they were manned up, he didn't have the dynamism to go make a play. So I thought they were a little different stylistically there. Just what I saw, what I observed on film.
And I think Dart is he's not as good a decision maker as I think he's slightly worse in terms of accuracy. I think he's slightly worse in terms of decision making. I think he might be slightly better in terms of, or at least in a similar world in terms of how they react to pressure, how they handle those types of things. But it gets made to look a lot better because his offensive line wasn't nearly as terrible as Shedeur's was.
I thought Dart, I don't have his turnover-worthy play percentages handy. I thought he actually took
solid.
Yeah, he took really good care of the ball. And then the end of the Florida game happened when I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. There's probably 4 passes that should have been picked. I think 2 were absolutely directly on him where he's just chucking it into double coverage. And we're talking like down 7 with time on the clock. This wasn't down 7 with 10 seconds left. You got to take a chance. Like, it was bad. Ole Miss's defense made a stop or 2 to give him more opportunities, and he continued to throw the ball to the defense. But there was at least 2 miscommunications there with his – it still might have been a bad decision, but you're talking about receivers stopping, and he's aggressive. He's trying to throw 50-50 balls a lot, and if his receivers stop in his route, it's going to look worse. So the end of the Florida game was bad overall, but maybe not like, hey, he should have thrown 3 or 4 picks bad. It was just 2 picks bad.
Yeah, according to PFF, he had 10 turnover-worthy plays last season, and 4 of them came in the LSU game. Like, they came in bunches. Generally, overall, it was 2.2%. Which is still really good, but as I said, Shedeur's was 1.7, I think, and had never been above 2 for his entire career. So again, it's like they're both strengths, but Shedeur's was better.
What'd you think of Dart's arm, by the way, too? Because this is where, I think there's more similarities than differences. Cam Ward has a cannon and plays hero ball. Shedeur and Dart, I don't think they both have great arms. They're fine, and they don't play hero ball as much. But Dart, I don't think Dart had a great arm. I thought it was okay RPM wise and just okay arm wise.
Same, falls into the same bucket of Shedeur's as it's an as expected. It's a non-notable in one direction or the other. It's an arm. If I'm not bringing it up at all, it's because it's just run of the mill arm. It's not strong. It's not weak. It's just normal.
The last thing I'll say on Dart, I mean, I've seen some people talking analytical profile in favor of Jaxson Dart. I mean, overall, he's been a pretty productive college quarterback. Going way back to the beginning of the show, I don't think there's any sort of analytical model or anything that should always point to this guy or that guy. But Dart's going to be near the top of those profiles, whether you're using PFF grades or the breakdown of grades and various metrics. And so that's one thing I think that's in Dart's favor, not as a slam dunk, but you just kind of like push him up over some other guys. Multiple years of good production from Jaxson Dart.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.